I won't sit here and defend burning down buildings from the 1100s or killing other musicians and so on. But the effect of the shock wave that hit Norway in that period, in hindsight, I do think it moved some boundaries in terms of artistic and religious freedom that needed to be moved.
Wardruna are a Norwegian band started in 2003, and musically they're like nothing you've heard before. Although they're usually associated with the metal scene, in fact, the first time I saw them live was at Hellfest, they are not a metal band. They are a Nordic folk band, and what they aim to do is to create a soundscape that brings us back to the Viking Ages. And that is because Wardruna, besides a musical project, it's also a historical endeavor. It's an opportunity to visit the ancestors of modern Scandinavia and immerse ourselves in the rich history of that land. Einar Selvik, who first came to fame as the drummer of Gorgoroth and who then founded Wardruna together with Gal and Lindy Hella, joins me today. Einar, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time for speaking with me today.
Pleasure is mine, sir.
It's been over a year since the last time that we spoke, and back then we were hoping that things would go back to normal, but sadly 2021 was still heavily restricted as far as music is concerned. So how have you been during this time?
I've been fine. At the same time, it's been a strange and challenging time for me, as well as most other people on this planet in this period. A period where you just have to find a constructive focus and do whatever you can and take care of yourself and the people around you as best you can. So yeah, it's been a strange time, but I'm doing fine and my people are doing fine.
The last time we spoke was, as I said, right around the time you released Kvitravn, and now with the benefit of hindsight, how do you feel about that album and about the way people have reacted to it?
Well, I'm still very proud of the album. Like on a personal level, I'm very pleased with it still. And of course, the reactions. I'm very happy in hindsight that we decided to be present in this period, where a lot of people and bands went silent, which is fully understandable. You know, releasing an album and not being able to support it with concerts and so on, that is not something the industry would recommend, basically. But I'm very happy that we decided to do it nonetheless, and to be there to release music in this period and be present. And that is something I feel our audience have really appreciated as well. We've received a lot of response on that fact that we've been there in this period. So I'm very happy we decided to do it that way.
Last year, Wardruna, since you mentioned the challenge of releasing an album without being able to tour for it, it's precisely something that you and many other bands tried to kind of compensate for by doing precisely a live event online, right? So try to stream something, create as close as you can.
You can't compensate. So we weren't fooling ourselves in thinking that would sort of compensate. That was more like wanting to mark the release with performing and giving something totally different. It's not like economic wise or in terms of the audience reach, it's a different planet than doing a tour in terms of the effect, and so that was more about doing something else. Sorry I interrupted you, but
oh no, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely correct. It was an incorrect word to use because indeed, I mean, it is financially disastrous for all bands to be unable right now to tour, and indeed, I used the word compensate, but you're not compensating at all what you didn't get to have by doing an actual tour. But well, you still had to do it, or they still decided to do it rather. And I was curious about for somebody who has such a significant experience touring and as a live musician, how was it for you to do this first flight of the White Raven concert? Because it must have been very strange to do something like this, as elaborate as it looks in the video, for example, but without the audience that you're used to perform in front of.
Yeah, but performing, that's it's about becoming one with your environment, whether it's 10 people in the room or it's 10,000, or if you're in a tent or in a forest or in a castle. It doesn't really matter. It's about becoming one with words, one with the music, and one with your environment. And that challenge is there, whether or not it's, like I said, it doesn't matter where you are. That was definitely something that was focused on, at least for me, that we didn't want to just walk on stage and film the exact same things as we do when we're on stage in front of an audience. We wanted to create something different, a different experience where you can compensate for some of those things, not being in the room, and etc. for the audience perspective. And for us, we hadn't been in the same room for over a year when we went into that room and performed those songs in front of a camera. And that friction was pretty powerful in itself. So that is definitely something I recollect very, very strongly, how powerful it felt to becoming one with the songs and with the group again. So yeah, you lose something, you gain something, and in any case, it's about being really, really present at that moment when you're singing that song. And I feel that we were able to capture that spark and that friction that was there, and ultimately that's what it comes down to. And of course, it wasn't decided before doing it that we were going to release it at this point. That was a decision that came afterwards, when we saw that, well, it has that quality that, or we feel it has that quality that you can connect to it, and it is something that can stand on its own 2 feet, both in a video format and an audio format. And of course, also, there are so many of our audience who have been asking us to release that, and also for many years prior to that, having a live product, especially in the video format. We don't do that many shows, so there are ultimately a lot of people who are not able to travel to the few concerts we do.
I was actually going to ask you why you had decided that it was worth releasing it as a physical product or as a video on demand, but it seems to be then that for you what was important, besides giving the fans this opportunity to finally see Wardruna live. And I was able to watch the concert yesterday, and having seen also Wardruna live, I think that one of the positive things that this allowed you is that you had the kind of camera movements and things like that you wouldn't normally be able to do in an actual concert. So it was a very nice way of kind of taking a close-up look at the kind of things that Wardruna does on stage. But it seems to be that for you it was also important to kind of document this episode, precisely because it had that energy of finally having everybody together in the same room.
Yeah, and literally that's what I mean. It's not like we rehearsed for a week before going into studio. This is the first time we're in a room together for all of us. So we all had to come really prepared and focused, and also the joy of being in the same room again was very powerful, and something I remember very clearly. And also, we didn't want, live productions are very often not very live. They are full of re-recordings and auto-tune and all of that, which is perhaps understandably so when you're doing it on a stage, because then it's more challenging than we were lucky in that sense that we recorded in a studio where the listening conditions are very perfect, and so So of course that allowed us to not to leave the recording more or less exactly as it was when we performed it, not do all of these re-recordings in the afterwork. So it is really what happened there, then and there.
Last year, besides Kvitravn and besides this live video with Wardruna, you also released a single with Ivar Bjornson of Enslaved. You both have a project that, for those who aren't familiar with it, you started at the behest of the Norwegian government. Basically, they commissioned you to create a musical piece to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Norwegian Constitution. How did that happen? Because considering the attention that you pay to Norwegian and Nordic history, it must have been great, really, to see that you are now invited to be part of that history, or at least of commemorating the history of your country.
I think the way it was done, I'm perhaps most pleased of, because there are many things with the Constitution and that I'm not a big fan of, and that was my main condition, when they called me, is that I'll do it if I'm allowed to criticize the Constitution, and they were of course very much up to that. It was sort of in the spirit of freedom of speech. They wanted this, and also the fact that they wanted artists who work with that part of our cultural heritage. So the fact that they wanted to highlight that part of our history and tradition and culture, that meant a lot. So being part of it is something that I of course appreciate. That they acknowledge the work we do, and what we see, even though me and Ivar work in two very different formats of music, what we quickly saw that even though the expression is different, a lot of our ideas and ways we approach these subjects are very similar, but we just have a totally different angle to it, both musically and philosophically, I would say, and so merging them has been a great experience, I would say. Of course, that that first piece for the Constitution, that was very much that was a little bit more locked, in the sense that it had a predetermined format. It was supposed to be Wardruna meets Enslaved in full format, and of course, when we decided to take our collaboration further on after this project, when we were again asked by the oldest musical festival in Norway, which is really started out as being a classical music festival, but then of course it encompasses more. When they asked us to do another commission piece together, then we were totally free to sort of cultivate what we felt worked and didn't, and decided we wanted to take it more into a acoustic landscape and perhaps scale it down a little bit more, which resulted in the Skuggsja album that so it's I don't think the final chapter has been written in our collaboration together as well. We really enjoy working together, so at some point I think and hope that we'll find time to do some more work together as well.
What do you plan to do in this project with Ivar? Because for people who only know you from Wardruna, it's obviously quite different. It really moves away from the, for lack of a better word, maybe you won't like this name, but like historical folk that you do, which is completely different from what you're doing with Ivar. What is your aim there?
Yeah, it totally, it totally depends on. I don't think there is a clear aim, really. It's and like all, I don't have rules in the sense that things either has to be this or that. Of course, in Wardruna, I have a very specific creative concept that I'm very true to. That it is the subjects who determine a lot of the yeah, instrumental needs and where I record, when I record, etc. But here it's a little bit different. I can play a little bit more, even more freely around with things, but there isn't like a clear mission. We want to take elements of what I do with Wardruna, but perhaps combine it more so with contemporary elements and the parts that Ivar brings from his musical tradition, being more guitar based and yeah, so and also coming from working a lot with electronic music, like ambient stuff. That is something he's very much into. So I feel that combination has been very good and very interesting to see how these different instrument types work together. So it's very much about exploration, and at the same time, of course, the most important thing is that you have something you want to say. That there is actual true nourishment supporting the song, that it comes from somewhere genuine. That's the most important thing in what I create, whether it's for Wardruna or this project or yeah, whatever.
I have read quite a bit about the history of heavy metal, obviously also about the history of black metal, and it is so incredible for me to see that despite the panic that, let's say, well, we're both getting old, so about 30 years ago existed in Norway about black metal and heavy metal. It is so incredible that now Norway is kind of embracing that heritage as well, in the sense that they are incorporating that type of musicians also into the cultural milieu of Norway.
Absolutely, and it's I think it was a. You know, I won't sit here and defend burning down buildings from the 1100s or killing other musicians and so on. I think a lot of shit happened, but the effect of the shock wave that hit Norway in that period, in hindsight, I do think it moved some boundaries in terms of artistic and religious freedom that needed to be moved. Of course, I don't support the way it was moved necessarily, but the effect of it is definitely visible, and definitely something that has been a positive effect in hindsight, at least. And of course, also at some point when the whole media hysteria calmed down and people realized that for most people it was about something else than that war between religions. It was about it was about culture. It was about art, a form of art that isn't more negative than other. That's like it's like opera. For some people, opera is just people screaming, and I guess it's the same with metal music. If you don't get it, it doesn't give you the energy. Then you might perceive it as noise or a negative force. But for the people who it does resonate with, it's just a positive thing. It's a healthy thing. And I think that's the power of music, whether it's jazz music or metal or traditional music. If it resonates with you, it's medicine. And yeah, I do think it took some time before it got acknowledged as that, but yeah, I think it's I think all in all it has saved more lives than it has taken.
Connected with this, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned before, which is that when you created this project with Ivar, you wanted to also criticize some of the things within the Constitution. Now, my knowledge of Norwegian constitutional law is very limited, but I do know that you used to have, for example, not a clear separation of church and state, even all the way to the 90s or even the 2000s.
Yeah,
So when you
Norway
mention
and Iran.
yeah, so it was quite ridiculous. So when you're mentioning that there was this criticism, is it also connected to precisely that lack of secularism in Norway?
Absolutely. Yeah. Defining a whole country
As a Christian nation.
as a Christian nation. I totally oppose that fundamentally. Not that I have anything against people choosing to be Christians, but it's a choice. I am not, and most people are not in this country. And so having these medieval, these dark age rules that even secured like a Christian majority in the government, by law, which is so fucking ridiculous. So the criticism more so of course partly about that, definitely, and about how you choose, how you also choose to relate to that part of history. I like truth in how history is being portrayed, and that is not happening even today. Truth is not happening, and how history is told, and truth is relative. You see it so clearly today, perhaps more clearly than in a very long time, how truth is something that is dictated too much, whether it's by media or by governments, or so that is it's a dangerous thing, and how there is a lot of politics in how you decide to tell the story of your history or your culture or whatnot. So I believe truth is such an important ingredient in how you reflect upon history, and a lot of positive is happening in those things, but we still have a way to go.
Regrettably, we're out of time, so I have just one thing for you. I saw that you have been able, thankfully, to do a few shows already. You did in the UK, in France, of course, in Norway as well. And after all of this time without being able to perform live, I just wanted to know, how was it for you to finally be back on stage with this loving crowd that is waiting for Wardruna?
Yeah, it's been fantastic, I have to say. It's being able to share our songs and also perform the new songs. Of course, you never know how people are gonna interact and react when you bring new songs to the stage, and that part has been amazing. I was very curious how it would be to be back, to be totally honest, and the reception has been overwhelming. So apparently, it's clear that we have missed people and people have missed us. That's what I conclude in a way, and that is, of course, on a personal level, even though it's not like an ego boost or anything, but it is fantastic to feel that love. That love is not something you can compare to anything else, and it's very powerful, and it's good to remember that again. That means a lot.
Einar, thank you so much for your time. It was really, really interesting to talk with you today. So have a very nice day, and I look forward to seeing you live whenever it is that we finally run into each other for this.
Yes.
Take care of yourself and have a great week.
Pleasure is mine, sir.